right, welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today on the show, we're talking about a Pixar movie. We are talking Turning Red, about a little girl who, whenever her emotions get out of check, she turns into a giant red panda. It is a very fun movie that, we don't get to talk about enough Pixar movies here on the show, so I'm really excited to talk about it. And joining me for the first time is Daniel Howat from Next Best Picture. Very happy to have Daniel on the show, and we got a great conversation coming up. So before we get to it, I do want to remind you, as always, to make sure you're subscribed to Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts, and of course to rate and review us, whether that's on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Pocket Casts, on Podchaser, on Good Pods, where we've been hanging around the top 10 recently in the indie film podcast charts. So thank you, everybody who's been listening over there on Good Pods, and continue to listen and continue to subscribe and continue to rate and review, and thank you for listening. You could also follow us on social media at Piecing Pod. Join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, where we continue the conversation about all the movies we talk about here on the show. And, of course, don't forget we do have the Produced by David Rosen Patreon, where you might even be listening to this right now because I'm posting it before it hits the main feed on the Patreon. Lots of other great advanced content. Our Uncharted episode is sitting there on the Patreon waiting for a VOD release, but once that film comes out on VOD, we'll release it to everybody. But for now, those awesome people who are patrons of the Produced by David Rosen Patreon get to hear it early, as well as bonus content from Awesome Movie Year, another great movie podcast that I produce, and from my music career. So check it out. It's patreon.com/bydavidrosen. And otherwise, just keep listening and sharing the show and rating and reviewing and subscribing and following and all those things. We really appreciate it. So with all that said, let's talk about Turning Red. All right, so we are talking about Turning Red, and joining me today is Daniel Howat. Daniel, how's it going, man?
I am doing so well. I'm excited to talk about Pixar, as always.
Yeah, right? When we did Luca last year, I realized, somehow it was my first time covering a Pixar movie. And they come out all the time, and I don't know why I hadn't gotten to one yet on this show. We don't cover everything, and I don't know how that happened, but I'm always happy to talk Pixar because Pixar is awesome.
Yeah. I have a really soft spot in my heart for Luca because one of my sons is named Luca.
Nice.
So we had a good, that one was on a loop in our house all of last year. Still is pretty regularly,
Sure.
But it got bumped out by Encanto. So
yeah. Nice. Yeah. Well, Encanto is, for the moment right now, it is, I think, bumping everything out in most households. So,
yes.
Yeah. So this is your first time on the show. So before we do get into Turning Red, why don't you tell people a little about you and what you do?
Yeah, so I write for a website called Next Best Picture. So we're really awards focused. So we cover the awards race. So obviously it's right in the heart of things now because the Oscars, as we're recording this, the Oscars are just under 3 weeks away. So we're getting pretty close there. So you'll find me writing a lot about that, primarily doing interviews. So I interview filmmakers, actors, all across. I love interviewing composers and cinematographers and things like that. So that's kind of my favorite thing to do is do interviews.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I've seen some of your interviews, and great stuff always. And we've been trying to make this happen for a while now, so I'm just really happy to have you here on the show. And for those listening at home, I run into Daniel at some of the critic screenings here in Vegas sometimes.
That's right.
And
Vegas locals here.
That's right. So it's always fun to make that happen. So let's start getting into Turning Red. We already established we're all Pixar fans. Who isn't a Pixar fan at this point? But was this particular one a big one on your radar? I mean, I know there was a little bit of, it was a bummer, let's just say, that this one is kind of skipping the theatrical release and just going straight to Disney. I guess for some people it's not a bummer, but for those of us who like to watch these things on the big screen, it was kind of a bummer.
Well, it's kind of a baffling decision, honestly, because I get the reasoning was COVID, right? Which I get. We're not out of a pandemic as much as some people want to be. We're still in it, but Sing 2 is cleaning up at the box office still, and that came out in mid-December, and so I'm kind of confused as to why they pulled this completely from theaters because I really think it would have made a good amount of money. Pixar is pretty upset about it from what I understand. So
Right.
yeah, and I don't blame them. I don't blame them.
Yeah, I don't blame them at all. And yeah, it's just, I guess we're just still in a transitional period at the moment. And so it makes for, it's not so much that they're necessarily making the wrong decisions, because yeah, we are still in a pandemic, but just nobody knows what to do. And so it's just kind of a mess in every direction. And it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. But yeah, I think that people are going to love this movie when it comes out. We're recording this still a few days away from its release, but I think that the reaction is going to be really good, because I had a lot of fun with this movie, and I'm just some 41-year-old childless dude. So I think anybody can like this movie for sure. But, we'll get into what works and what doesn't work here along the way. Let's start getting into some puzzle pieces. What do you have for your first piece here?
Yeah, so my first piece, well, before we get into my first puzzle piece, I wanted to say, you and I talked a little bit about this as we were talking about this episode. I feel like a lot of the puzzle pieces for this movie, or at least some of them, would be like anime. I think there's a lot of anime influence in this movie.
Sure.
That's actually just a total like weak spot for me. I'm just not. I don't watch much anime at all. So it does kind of feel, as I was putting my list together, I'm like, man, it feels like it's missing some clear anime influence here, but it's just not. I don't know enough about anime to be able to speak well about it, but
Right, absolutely, and I agree with you there. I mean, I know I've seen Rama 1/2 is listed as one of the possible ones that I've seen people make comparisons to, and I've seen, like, I've never actually watched it, but I've seen it in pop culture. I've seen, like, scenes from it, and it looks like, similar things with the panda and stuff like that. So I mean, I'm sure that there are so many anime influences that could be spoken to, and I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I don't watch anime really. I mean, I play a lot of video games, so I see it like kind of on the periphery there. But so I'm in the same boat.
Yeah. I heard Sailor Moon is another one that Domee Shi has said. The director Domee Shi has said that influenced this a lot. But Sailor Moon's huge. I've never watched a single episode, so I just really don't know anything about it.
Absolutely.
So my first puzzle piece here. While I was watching Turning Red, the first thing I said out loud was, "This is Pixar's Lady Bird." So that is my first. That's my first puzzle piece. I think the correlations between Lady Bird and Turning Red are so clear. And that's a top 10 film for me. Lady Bird. I love Lady Bird so much. But yeah, the early 2000s setting, the overbearing mother who wants her daughter to be perfect, the daughter trying to become her own person. In Lady Bird, Christine calls herself Lady Bird, while Mei Mei turns into a panda. There's some kind of correlation there.
Sure.
But yeah, I think they're both really beautiful coming of age stories that wrestle with the relationships between a mother and daughter, which is such a specific relationship. Obviously, we're both dudes here, but yeah. I think we can see the parallels there. What I find really interesting about both movies is the genuine love that there is between the mom and daughter. It's not like neither are an actual depiction of abuse or anything like that. It's just a mom trying to make her daughter the best she can, and maybe going about it the wrong way, and kind of having to reconcile that. But yeah, I think there's tons of parallels between those films for sure.
Absolutely. It was also on my list, and
Nice.
I think the influence is 100% there, and I love that it focuses on both the differences and the similarities between the mother and daughter, which is something that Lady Bird did so well. Also, I mean, it's all about that push-pull, love-hate relationship, but that is just such a universal thing, and Lady Bird is like truly, at least recently, like one of the best examples of that you can find. And I think that this kind of plays in that same territory for sure. So I think that's a great piece to kick it off with. Yeah. I'll go with my first piece. I thought of the TV series Pen 15, which I love so much. It's so ridiculous. Obviously, a lot dirtier than anything you're going to find in a kid's movie like Turning Red, but dealing with the same issues, though, the same messiness of teenage life, of puberty, of growing up, and specifically growing up in that era that's kind of like, right before the internet, but people already had computers and they started to get cell phones or maybe just pagers, but like it was all in that very transitional period there. And Pen 15, for those that haven't watched it, it's created by and starring Maya Erskine and Anna Konkle, who are two comedians who basically play themselves at, I believe it's 13 years old, and it's absolutely ridiculous. And some of the situations they get into are just really, really go very far into, the clean way of saying it, I guess, would be just the messiness of that teenage life, but it gets pretty out there and crazy. But like I said, very similar situations as to what Mei Li and her friends get into in Turning Red.
I have not watched Pen 15. I keep hearing really good things about it. Is it as cringy as I imagine it is? Is it kind of cringe comedy?
It's absolutely cringe comedy. That, like, if you were to set like a very specific genre, that would be the genre for it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
But I definitely see how that would have a lot of parallels here.
Highly recommended.
Okay.
What do you have for your next piece?
My next one, I think very different comedy styles than Pen 15, but probably some of the same cringiness. Very similar to Lady Bird as well. It's another recent film, 8th Grade, Bo Burnham's 8th Grade. Much like Lady Bird, it's a specific take on growing up as a young girl, and I think the age of Mei Mei and Kayla are pretty similar. Maybe they're the exact same age, and I love that both of them have this almost performative confidence. Like,
sure,
Kayla does her whole thing of recording vlogs on the internet and Gucci, and May's maybe less performative, but she starts the movie with just this bravado and just really like the opening narration and all that stuff, developing feelings for boys, all those things. I really love the specificity of that story and how it relates here. In 8th Grade, they deal a lot with social media, which isn't around in Turning Red. But still, there's a lot of the same like self-consciousness and wanting to fit in, struggling with, the outward representation of that feeling, feeling like a monster in your own skin. I think the metaphor in Turning Red isn't super subtle, but it works really well. And I think it really, you could see how that metaphor would have probably connected really well for Kayla in 8th Grade.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think to that like performative thing, like this being set in 2002 and being before social media and all that, I think kids now having to grow up with that, I mean, it just makes so much sense why Kayla would be similar, but especially Kayla would have it because she has to do it every day for social media, and it's a scary thing for the future. I can't imagine as a parent.
It's so scary. Even I've only got 3-year-olds, and they're 2 3-year-old boys, and so they're gonna have a very different experience than young girls as well. But yeah, I'm already thinking through those things even as they're 3 years old. Having to figure out what a life lived online looks like. It's so bizarre. I'm not that old, but even still, it's like, it's so different than when I was a kid. It's just it's so bizarre how fast the internet has just overtaken adolescence.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really weird. I'm sure we'll get a Pixar movie about that soon. But I'll go to another one, which I haven't seen since I was a kid. I told myself I was going to rewatch this specifically for this episode, and I just didn't have time. But I mean, it's a classic. It's Teen Wolf.
Of course.
A comedy that's inspired by monster movies, and this animated movie is inspired, I think, a lot by Teen Wolf and that melding of monster movie imagery with the whole coming of age comedy thing. And this movie, this main character has to deal with all of the changing emotions of being a teenager, as well as the, having to deal with being a monster and learning that she's got these monster tendencies, and also another connection that's run in her family all this time, and she didn't realize that, which is something that also is explored in Teen Wolf. So I think there's a lot of Teen Wolf in here. I've never seen the series, but I'd imagine it deals with similar things. And the original movie, like I said, I haven't seen in a long time, but I know it was a favorite when I was a kid.
Yeah, I haven't watched that in a decade or more. I definitely crossed my mind because I was like, there's a lot of parallels there with werewolf imagery and all that stuff. But yeah, that's a good puzzle piece.
We got to put that on our homework list here, both of us.
Yeah,
Daniel.
exactly. Got to catch up.
So, what do you got next?
Yeah. Next, I also went kind of thinking of the monster route to a degree. But more specifically, one ending part of Turning Red. Are we talking spoilers here? Are spoilers fair game?
Spoil away. Yeah,
okay.
we hope that everyone's watched this movie first.
Perfect.
So yes.
So I was thinking about towards the end of the film when Mei Mei's mom turns into her panda. She kind of rages out and becomes a huge, giant, almost like a kaiju kind of thing. She just starts to come after to try to rescue Mei Mei. And so the whole stadium sequence really kept standing out in my mind, where her mom comes and kind of starts destroying the four-town performance. And it reminded me so much of Ghostbusters, of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. A lot of the imagery there, the kind of moving seemingly in slow motion as she's kind of tracking the kids down. You have the group on the ground trying to figure out a ritual to bring her down. So yeah, I was going through a lot of monster movies in my head, but I couldn't get Stay Puft Marshmallow Man out of my head for that one.
That's great. That's such like a left field version of a kaiju, but definitely
not exactly the same thing. But yeah, I was also trying to think of the other thing that the imagery reminded me of was Roland Emmerich's Godzilla. Do you remember that movie enough? I think he attacks a stadium, but I couldn't remember. I haven't seen that in who knows how long.
Yeah,
for some reason I had that in my head.
I'm not sure. I think I wanted to say in a King Kong maybe, but
maybe.
Yeah, possibly. I haven't seen that since opening weekend either. That was a long time ago, and I think most people don't want to remember that
right, exactly.
very much. So, but no, I love that though, and that whole sequence is great. And by the way, we haven't mentioned yet, but Four Town, awesome,
so good.
Yeah.
What is Nobody Like You? I have definitely listened to that multiple times.
A classic. It's surprising. It's Billie Eilish, right? And her brother wrote it.
Yeah, they wrote it. They're insane songwriters. Even in a project like this, where the song's it's just a early 2000s boy band song.
Sure,
it fits perfectly, but it's still really listenable. Like it's not. They didn't make fun of boy bands with making the song. They made an actual good boy band song.
Sure,
really remarkable.
Yeah, really great stuff. I'll go to my next piece here, and I think this is probably a fairly obvious one, but I'm going to go with a character that's been in a lot of different movies over the years, and that is the Incredible Hulk.
Nice.
Yeah, it's kind of obvious, but a character whose emotions, when they get out of control, turns into a literal monster. And there's various incarnations over the years that have between the comics and the movies and then into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and just all of them kind of take different approaches to the character and to what it means for that character to have that ability, and how they deal with it personally and what it does to their mental state and all that, but all of them deal with that same thing of, if you can't get your emotions in line, if you can't be a functioning person and be able to control yourself, then you're going to go all crazy and turn into this monster character. And that's what happens to Melee, turning into a big giant panda.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. Yeah, I definitely thought of Hulk. Who's your favorite Hulk? When you were thinking of that one, who popped in your head the most?
I mean, even though I'm not the biggest Marvel guy in the world, I've got to go with Ruffalo. I mean, just because Mark Ruffalo's great.
Yeah, he's had more of a chance to shine than any other ones. But I think Edward Norton's Hulk didn't get enough love. He was only in one movie, but I think he did pretty good at it.
Yeah, Edward Norton's great, and I think he just needed, like you said, didn't get a chance to shine. He needed more than one movie to get there, I think, and
for sure,
just didn't happen.
For sure.
So, what do you got next?
So next, actually, very similar sort of story to Hulk, but in a completely different direction, in the kind of an indie drama route. I thought of a relatively recent monster movie, I think from 2017, called Colossal. Have you seen Colossal?
Oh, great movie. Yeah.
I haven't seen it maybe since it came out, but it's kind of stuck in the back of my head. And so when we were thinking about this one, the similarities are endless here. I mean, in Colossal, you've got Anne Hathaway's character struggling with alcoholism, and then news starts reporting that there's this monster in Korea, and she begins to realize she has this connection, and she's controlling this monster. So a lot like Turning Red, the metaphor isn't really subtle. It's a pretty obvious metaphor here, but it's a really useful metaphor, similar to Hulk. It's
right.
In Colossal, it's this woman's alcoholism is just leaving a path of destruction in her wake, and same thing for May in Turning Red. She's, her emotions are out of control. She's trying to figure out how to, deal with all the big things that she's feeling. And when she has to learn how to control it. And that's what her mom wants her to do, but just helping her go about it the wrong way. But yeah, I think whether it's alcoholism or puberty or turning into a green rage monster, I think it's a really useful metaphor.
Yeah, absolutely. I hadn't thought of it, but that's a great piece to bring to this. And yeah, I think some of the detractors of this movie have focused a little too much on the metaphor being just specifically puberty. And while that's certainly a part of it, I think it's everything that deals with growing up, with dealing with parents, dealing with what you want to do with your life, like everything that goes with being a teenager. And I think there's just a lot more to it than just that. And I think opening up to all of that is where this movie really starts to shine.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it's a lot bigger than people are giving it credit for. That doesn't mean it's subtle, but it's still really effective. It encompasses insecurities and feelings for boys, all those things. Like it just really it encompasses a lot. It's good.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I got one more piece left, and that really just has to do with the ending. But in the end, we learn that part of the ritual that her family has kind of kept secret, but have known about for all these centuries or whatever, involves playing music to control the emotions and to rein in the panda and all of that. And I thought of the end of Bill and Ted Face the Music, the recent Bill and Ted sequel, where everybody has to come together and use their singing powers and musical powers to all perform this weird, funky song that saves the day. And I think it's done better here. That was one of my biggest criticisms of Face the Music, was that and it's kind of an impossible thing for them to have made a song that would actually save the world in Face the Music. So it was kind of an uphill battle. But I think here the music was awesome, especially once Four Town joins in.
Right.
How can a song with Four Town in it not be awesome? So
right.
So it all kind of comes together in that way of music kind of being the hero at the end.
That's so good. I missed Bill and Ted 3. I didn't catch it. So and I really caught up. So yeah, no, that's good. So I didn't know that's how they ended the film. That's great.
You got to. Sorry for the spoiler there.
That's all right. That's all right.
Yeah, you got to, after the other two movies, kind of set it up that, music is going to save the world. Music has to save the world when we finally bring the guys back. So
that's great. Love it.
Yeah. So do you have another piece?
I have one more. And I'm going to be honest, this was a little bit of a stretch in terms of calling it a puzzle piece, but it's something I feel like it's something worth discussing. It's less than 6 months old. That's why I say it's a little bit of a stretch, because it's so new. It's obviously not an influence on Turning Red, but it's Encanto. I already talked about it earlier. I was really surprised at how much similar ground these films tread. Like really, as I was thinking about the film afterwards, I was like, wow, both were about these overbearing maternal figures, grandmother in Encanto, mom in Turning Red, and it's just a story about dealing with generational struggles. her mother was so focused on being perfect, in control, and wanting to kind of shut down these inner demons for May, and that's what happens in Encanto. It's a story about generational trauma from top to bottom, and Abuela wants to protect her whole family and be perfect to earn their gifts, earn their powers. And she takes her anger out on Mirabel, and things start to fall apart. So yeah, it was just very interesting that both of these films, released within 4 months of each other, from the same studio, had such similar themes, both really important themes that I don't think animated films have explored. Generational trauma, I would never think that Disney would really kind of hyper focus on that, but it's really important to do that. And so it was just it's very interesting that both of those films do that.
I'm curious, obviously animated films take a long time to make, but I wonder how much of everybody being stuck at home with their families over the last 2 years plays into that.
Yeah, really. Yeah, no, that's super interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think that's a great one, though, to bring up here and to end on, because, even though it's recent, I mean, it definitely, they come from the same place for sure, and it definitely makes sense to include. So I will go and read down our finished puzzle list here, and of course, we started off talking about how neither of us are really experts on anime, but there's lots of animes that could probably be cited here. But then we moved on to Lady Bird, Pen 15, 8th Grade, Teen Wolf, Ghostbusters, The Incredible Hulk, Colossal, Bill and Ted Face the Music, and Encanto. And I think a great list of movies, like a lot of really good stuff here. And I love that you brought 8th Grade into it, because I think that really, I don't know why I didn't even think of that one when I was making my list, but it's such a perfect one. And especially for the change in era and what they're dealing with. They don't have, social media to like really nail home some of the themes that 8th Grade dealt with, but they're so similar though, and it just kind of shows growing up at that age, has so many challenges regardless of the era. But any closing thoughts? Anything that we didn't quite get to with Turning Red?
No, I really appreciated Turning Red. I'm not sure that it landed as strong for me as some of Pixar's other recent films like Luca or Soul. I feel like I loved the themes, but maybe the emotion, it didn't have an emotional punch at the very end for me. I wasn't really moved like I typically am with Pixar films. But I think the themes, it was really refreshing, again, speaking as a dude, but it was really refreshing to see a young girl's journey discussed so openly in a Pixar film, like literally talking about pads and tampons and periods. Like, that's shocking in a way that it shouldn't be in a film. That's what girls go through, right? So I think that was refreshing, just the honesty there.
Yeah, I mean, these movies, they're almost always about either growing up or learning how to be yourself or learning how to go through tough times. And like all these animated movies tend to deal with those kinds of issues. And so, why not be real about them? Everybody has to grow up and learn this stuff. So absolutely. Yeah. And as to the emotional punch, I do think you're right that they're maybe not aiming for it here.
I agree.
And so I think that's okay for a little bit of a variety, because they don't really want to get pigeonholed as you're gonna cry your eyes out if you watch this movie studio. So totally. But no, great stuff all around. Daniel, this was great. Do you have another movie you watched recently you'd like to recommend to our listeners?
Yes. This may be slightly cheating because it's not available to watch yet. But one of my favorite movies that I've seen so far this year, not one of my favorite, my favorite movie of the year so far was one. I only caught one film at Sundance online, and it was a movie called Cha Cha Real Smooth. And it was bought by Apple TV, so it'll come. I'm guessing this summer it'll come to Apple TV. It is phenomenal. When I say it's my favorite movie of the year, I feel very confident in saying it'll be my number one at the end of the year, and it's only March that we're recording this. It's just that good. It's so charming. It's like a dramedy about this kid. Not a kid. He's like a just graduated from college. He's just a young guy who's trying to become an adult and figure out what he wants to do with his life, and dealing with this slightly older woman and her autistic daughter, and kind of developing relationship with them. It is absolutely hilarious. and absolutely emotionally devastating too. It's both of those things. It's so mature and romantic and really heartbreakingly honest too. And it's directed by a 23-year-old guy named Cooper Raiff, which is shocking. So yeah, I loved this movie so much. I cannot wait to watch it 100 more times because it's one of those movies that is like perfectly tailored to my tastes. It's like exactly my type of movie. And I couldn't be more impressed with it. So yeah, did you happen to watch that at Sundance?
I did not, and I am very much looking forward to it. I loved his last film, Shithouse, and I'm so excited for it. I can't wait for it to come out. I'm very excited for everything that Cooper Raiff does from here on out. I mean, it's just really great talent. Yeah, absolutely.
I have to name drop because how often do I get to do that? I just met him last week. I'm in a group called the Hollywood Critics Association, and I met him at the awards show last week. He and his girlfriend like cleaned off my jacket when I had a smudge on it. We chatted for like 10 minutes. He was just the most lovely guy. It was incredible, and he's got 2 movies under his belt. It's wild. He's a crazy talent. It was amazing.
That's awesome. Well, I am very excited to see it, and maybe we can get you back on for that episode since you're so excited for it.
Yes, I would love to.
I'm looking forward to covering that movie. So yeah, we'll have to talk when that finally hits Apple TV. But awesome, Daniel. Why don't you tell people where they can find you and your writing again?
Yeah, the most active place that I am is on Twitter. You can follow me there at HowatDK. That's HOWATDK. And you can find my writing and interviews at Next Best Picture, and I'm on the Next Best Picture podcast regularly as well. So you can find me there.
Awesome. Daniel, thanks so much. I'm so glad we finally got you on the show, and hopefully we'll be getting you back again sometime soon. I'm Josh Bell.
And I'm Jason Harris, and we co-host a podcast called Awesome Movie Year.
Each season, we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year.
We deep dive into these specific years, and we pick out why they were such great years for films. We go over the biggest hits, the biggest flops, the best picture, some personal picks, some cult classics.
Years we've covered in past seasons include 1994, 2003, 1977, and 1984, and we've got all of film history to look forward to. So check us out at awesomemovieyear.com or wherever you listen to podcasts.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that conversation about Turning Red. Thank you to Daniel Howat for joining me on that one. Make sure to go check out Next Best Picture and check out everything else that Daniel's up to. And while you're at it, make sure you're subscribed to Piecing It Together. Maybe this is just your first time listening and you haven't hit that subscribe button yet. So if you haven't, hit subscribe wherever you're listening. And of course, if where you're listening happens to be either Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Podchaser or Good Pods, one of those ones with a rating button, a 5-star button, even better, hit that button and give us a nice little review. We appreciate it. You could also follow us over on social media at Piecing Pod. Join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, where we continue the conversation about all the movies we talk about here on the show. And last but not least, of course, there's the Patreon I told you about at the top of the show, the Produced by David Rosen Patreon. It's patreon.com/bydavidrosen. You can subscribe. You don't have to, but we appreciate it. So yeah, that does it for this episode. Although I do want to mention, we didn't quite mention this during the episode. We mentioned how great the little friend group is within Turning Red, but the character Abby, what an awesome character. Best thing about this movie to me. It didn't quite come up in the conversation, but I just wanted to mention it here as we're closing up. One of my favorite characters in a Pixar movie in recent years. So, just shout out to Abby. That's a great character. So let's close this thing out with a piece of music like I always do. And I figure in celebration of Four Town, the band within the movie, I should play something poppy and upbeat. So I'm going to go with a track called Head on Fire from my third album, Head Like Fire. I'm not singing on it or anything like that. It's not that kind of thing. It's not exactly boy band, but it is upbeat and poppy. So I thought it would be a good one to close us out with. So enjoy the music. We'll be back with more Piecing It Together real soon.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.